Welcome you all to the Middleton City Hall and the Plan Commission meeting on Tuesday, October 10th, 2017. And with that, I open the meeting, and the first item on the agenda is minutes.
For approval.
Need a second.
Second.
So, well, there's no discussion here. I will say all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we are all in favor, and then motion for the minutes is passed. So now the next item is the specific implementation plan modification for signage for Great Water on Hubbard Avenue. Mark?
We do have the sign company representative here, Bridget. In case you have any questions, they are requesting, the applicant's requesting to display a sign that's only 13 square feet in area on the front facade, consisting of LED channel letters, flat cut letters, centered over the tenant's space. And the sign easily complies with our standard formula of 1 square foot per lineal foot of frontage. And I personally really like it.
That means it's lit, right? When it's channel?
Right.
No.
And she's here. Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, any, yes, Kathy?
Marilyn, is this part of the Opera House, or is it a separate building?
Part of my Opera House.
As a landmark, do you think that this would have to be sent through them at all?
The Shoette.
I think it would be okay.
Okay,
Shoette previously had a sign there, right, or not?
Yeah, it was lit.
and it was lit, okay.
Well, yeah, the Landmarks Commission does typically review all exterior site changes, but I don't remember ever taking the Shoette sign there, so that might have been an oversight. It is very similar in nature to what was there previously. I don't know, is it being, do you know how it's being affixed to the building? Is it in a similar, I mean, is it going into the same screw locations that are already in the building, or is it going into the bricks or the mortar?
It's going to the painted facade. I think that's wood backer.
It's wood there?
So it's going in the same location, it'll be attached the same way, flush to the building.
So you're okay, Kathy? Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. All right, so the next item is specific implementation plan modification for signage, Frostwood Farms, Greenway Boulevard.
You too?
Yeah. Bridget's also here for this item.
All right.
A little bit of background. This is the final sign. There's 3 tenants in the building, and this is the 3rd sign package. The other 2 that were approved previously for Dickey's Barbecue Pit and World of Beer had different signs that were channel letters. Although in the case of the Dickey's, they had a cabinet that was a component of their sign. This application is for a 2 30-square-foot signs, one on the north, one on the south elevation. They have 2 fronted. They have the parking on the south side, just like the other 2 tenants, so it's appropriate to have signs on both sides. The signs adhere to the standard formula of 1 square foot per lineal foot of frontage. And there are some constraints here with the building, the way it's designed, as I understand it, from looking at the drawing and having gone out there to look at it. They don't have the same type of facade over the sign as you see with the other 2 tenants that are there. And so Bridget can elaborate maybe on how they got to where it is, but it is shown as being on an awning.
So in working with Frostwood Farms, they really did want to keep kind of in unison with the rest of the building, and the uniqueness of this sign is at nighttime when it illuminates, it looks like the letters are individual. However, we've designed it in a cabinet that kind of rests on the canopy, and that is in turn also keeping with their brand identity. They do a lot of white backgrounds with their dark green letters, and dark green letters on the dark gray facade would not show up during the day. So that's kind of how we arrived at this solution.
Any questions?
I'll move
Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, any more questions or discussion now? Okay, if there are no more questions or discussion, I'm going to call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion for the sign for Frostwood Farm is passed unanimously. So the next one is the specific implementation plan modification for a safety fence around storm water ponds, Costco.
There's somebody here for this. This is the request to install 6-foot black vinyl-coated fences around the stormwater ponds. One's on the north edge of the parking lot, and the other's along the eastern edge near the creek. And that's all I know. Are you here to answer questions, I assume?
Yes, I'm here to answer questions.
Okay, so you guys had a chance to look at these papers. Any?
I just have a curiosity question about why the fences are being proposed.
The fence is being proposed as a safety measure because the ponds are adjacent to the rear portion. The rear portion of the parking lot.
Have there been issues with them? With the?
The ponds are newly proposed. Currently, there are biofilters that don't have any standing
Okay.
water.
Can you state your name and affiliation for the record?
Nick Tecca with Grafe.
Oh, I read that idea.
Okay, any other? Well, need a motion now then.
Right. I'll make the motion.
Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, now the discussion. It's a slightly taller, it's a 4-foot fence rather than 3,
I
right?
read that, it just sailed right on through, sorry.
Well, that's how it is, so any questions? Okay, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so I'm assuming that Kurt will vote for it, or did he say anything?
He did.
Yes, aye.
Kurt's in there.
Okay, so it passes unanimously. The next one is a request for rezoning from 2-family residential R2 to Planned Development District, General Implementation Plan, Stagecoach Trail Apartments, J.T. Klein and Company, 6620, 6626 Century Avenue. Mark.
So, and I apologize too.
Oh,
I'm going to
okay.
pull up the
Presentation.
presentation. This is the computer I'm also taking minutes on, so it's just going to take a minute to get everything going here.
I'll just give a little background. Everyone here will recall that on August 22nd, there was a public hearing held before the Plan Commission on the applicant, Jacob Klein, on his request to rezone 3 parcels from R2 to a Planned Development District General Implementation Plan. At that meeting, the Commission also received public input on the historic Pheasant Branch Crossing design guidelines that were drafted by planning staff in conjunction with Vanderwall. Subsequently, the developer has worked with us at staff level to revise the plans to try and have a more cohesive design, meshing with the design guidelines that have been drafted, which also, by the way, have been reviewed by the Landmarks Commission last Monday, a week ago. And they supported the direction that we were going with the design guidelines. The applicant has also reduced the number of dwelling units from 48 to 46, although the footprint of the building is essentially the same size. In your packets, I included a variety of information, our updated staff report, as well as a frequently asked questions document. We made these available on the city's website as well. We've received some additional correspondence, which we endeavored to include in your packet, but we missed one that came in on, I think it was Sunday, and that's been provided at your places, and that was from Susan, or was that Rick? Susan? Okay. Susan Reish. And then also late this afternoon, we received a letter from Alan Muirhead, and that should be at your places too. Does everybody have those? Yes. So I do have a short presentation, which we just finished this afternoon, and the developer will probably make a few remarks, I would imagine, as well, and is available to answer questions. So, go ahead. So basically, as I'm sure everyone in the room knows, this is the site. Can everyone see okay, or should we
We
turn off?
probably can't see. I'm trying to figure out where to.
Oh, moving the,
I can go up to the middle.
actually, I'm not sure how the lights, oh, there we go. We have
Is that
good? Yeah, that's better.
You want another one?
Yeah. Kurt probably can't see either. I did send you the slides, Kurt. I don't know if you,
I can hear.
Come join in. Yes.
okay. Kurt, you said you got them?
I have the slides, yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. All right, so, thanks for the pointer, David. So this is the site right here. On the zoning map that you see, it's zoned R2. There are some single-family residences along the west and northwest of the site. To the north of that are condos, which I did include a drawing, a map in the frequently asked questions showing the amount of frontage this site has, which is 100 feet, as you can see here, 100 feet of frontage along the Conservancy. To the north, the Solitude condos, I indicated that it was 400 feet, and I stand corrected. This lot, this is the Solitude, and this lot, which I counted as Conservancy, turns out is privately owned by these folks here. So although Solitude has 400 feet of frontage along the east lot line, it's not all technically Conservancy. They have 170 feet of frontage on the Conservancy because of the private ownership. And then to the north are the Conservancy condos, which have about 1,700 feet of frontage. Here's across the street, we have the Stam House and some residential to the west, and there's a residence to the south as well, and of course the commercial building at the corner with Branch Street. A little recap of how we've gotten to this point over the last couple of years. Initially, this project was actually not before the city. It was the developer started working with the neighbors first with 2 meetings held at the Prairie Cafe. And then in March of 16, we had the 73-unit concept before the city, but the city didn't take action on that. And over the course of the summer, that evolved into a 96-unit concept, which then was scaled back down. By the way, I should say that was on 6 lots. 4 of the 6 lots that the developer owned 6 lots, and this concept was for covering 4 of those 6 lots, the western 4. The eastern 2 would be remaining open under a plan that the city has to purchase those 2 lots to add to the Conservancy for a trailhead. So spring of this past year, there was the official public hearing on the 83-unit concept, and the Plan Commission and the Council decided to deny that zoning amendment by the developer. Next slide, please. So this summer, developer scaled back the project by eliminating the western lot, which is here to the west, and reducing the footprint to 19,439 square feet with the 48 units of apartments constructed in 3 stories with 1 underground story for parking. The hearing was held on August 22nd, as I mentioned earlier, and since then the development has gone through some architectural revisions to the architectural style, and we feel at the staff level and our planning consultant that it's much more compatible and very compatible with the design guidelines for the neighborhood. And then today, of course, this is here before you tonight to consider this revised plan, which now is 46 units with a pitched roof. We heard a number of concerns at the hearing both last spring and then, of course, again in August. Density, building mass, height, design, stormwater management, proximity to the wetland that's in the Conservancy, about 75 feet away, traffic, compatibility with the neighborhood and the Conservancy, questioning the consistency with city plans and our TIF plans, why this project in this location, why not use PDD infill, which is a different zoning category. I'll get into that in a moment. And then there was a perception that there could be a conflict of interest with city plans for acquisition of the property for the trailhead. A little background on PDD zoning. This is from our zoning ordinance. Basically, I'll just read through the slides quickly, Mayor. It provides a regulatory framework to encourage improved environmental design by allowing flexibility in the development of land while ensuring compliance with the basic intent of the zoning ordinance and the city master plan, or what we now call the comprehensive plan. City has successfully used PDD zoning for a wide variety of developments from sites covering many acres, for example, Middleton Hills, Cedar Ridge, and much of our business parks west of the Beltline, to sites that are less than an acre. Each PDD has its own unique set of zoning regulations. So just because a site is zoned PDD one site doesn't mean it's the same setbacks and permitted uses as another. They're their own customized set of zoning regulations. Regardless of whether it's PDD regular or PDD infill, we go through this process of reviewing a GIP, a General Implementation Plan, which identifies the development concepts, provides a rationale for the rezoning and other general information. If that step is successful, then the property is rezoned to PDD-GIP. The next step then becomes the specific implementation plan, which has all the details, site design, design information, architecture, landscaping, lighting, stormwater, etc. Any significant changes to the GIP, for example, when the Middleton Hills neighborhood considered the changes to the grocery store, that was a change to the general implementation plan, so that had to go through a new hearing. Like this process was a public hearing. We had that same process when we changed the GIP for Middleton Hills. I want to emphasize that rezoning to PDD does not give the applicant unilateral authority to do anything except for what is specifically permitted in the GIP. That's been a concern raised when we zoned to GIP for other projects. Parcels less than 100,000 square feet, our ordinance has this language. Presumptively, those are too small to be approved, but small projects may still be submitted and considered. Keep in mind, this was written in the late 80s, and a lot has changed over the last 30 years, but that's the language that exists in our ordinance from the 80s. Since then, and the intent at the time was for that zoning classification to apply to urbanized sites, highly developed sites like University Avenue. Same application and review procedures, but with a few additional criteria listed in the ordinance, which have been pointed out by a number of people concerned about this project. Our history with this size of PDD, the small PDDs under 100,000 square feet since 1990, we've had 25 of them, and it just so happens 13 of them were zoned regular PDD and 12 were zoned PDD infill. All but one of those were under 50,000 square feet in size. Our attorney back in the 90s, and again now, emphasizes that this is a policy decision for the council, for the Plan Commission. With their guidance, the council makes that decision as to which type of PDD to use. The developer in this case applied for PDD zoning, not infill, just like he did with his project earlier this year. One of the concerns, I'll touch on a few of them that were listed. One of the concerns is density of the project. One thing that I've found difficult over the years is it's hard to compare density between projects because there's a lot of variables. A lot might have more green space on it, for example. They vary in size for different reasons. So it can be challenging to do an apples-to-apples comparison, and I wanted to call out next slide, please. An example here, we received this from a neighbor of the project, and I just want to call out this is a helpful slide. It takes the table that I put together for area of the PDDs and the density based on the number of units per area, per acre. And so the original Stagecoach project that covered, where the rezoning encompassed 6 lots, but it was actually on 4 of those lots. The original density is calculated at 35.2. Today's project that's before you today is the rezoning request was just for the 3 lots, and it shows a higher density. But next slide, please. But to compare apples to apples, this original 6 lots encompassed the Susan Bry's property to the west as well as the trailhead site. Susan Bry's property is no longer part of the project, but if one included the trailhead site, had the developer simply included the trailhead site in it like he did last time, the density of this project would actually be less and comparable to Cardinal Row. And so it's just another perspective that we need to be careful when we compare density, that we are it's apples to apples comparison.
Mark, that was my slide to start with. And the additional information is meaningless. The numbers that I had in that slide were the numbers I took from your chart.
Right.
And adding in a mythical 2 additional lots on the side has no bearing whatsoever.
I'm respecting the fact that there's a different opinion on this. I'm saying there's another perspective. I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I'm just pointing out that the land area for the trailhead parcel is unchanged in both proposals. That's all I'm trying to point out. So, the stormwater management has been a significant concern, and I'm not a stormwater engineer, but I've learned a lot about it in the course of this project. Originally, when this was proposed last year, the developer did 7 soil borings on 1.5 acres, the western 4 lots. One of the borings, number 6, which is on the towards the northeast end of the site, did indicate some concern with the amount of groundwater. Soil and groundwater conditions do not appear suitable for infiltrating significant quantities of stormwater, was the review from CGC, or I can't remember the firm's name. And so that basically was being flagged to identify some additional measures that could be taken for stormwater mitigation. The model for the development is based on assumes a 3.6 inches per hour. The developer's model actually also indicates that they could be in compliance with their whole development if the infiltration rate were reduced to 0.5 inches per hour. The exact infiltration rate has not yet been determined. This is the case with developments all across the city. As the early stage, it takes more detailed engineering to determine exact infiltration rates as projects evolve. But the developer's committed to doing additional testing as necessary, and there are options and solutions to achieving compliance with our stringent stormwater ordinance. Of course, any final zoning approval, like we do with all projects, we would make that a condition of approval to have complete adherence with our ordinance. I mentioned briefly the design guidelines for the Pheasant Branch crossing. This is an outgrowth of the concept plan that the city has been working with for a couple years now. The concept plan was approved by the council in September, and the design guidelines are currently being reviewed by committees. The Landmarks Commission signed off on them. There was a referral also to the Conservancy Lands Committee and Water Resources. Yeah. And those 2 committees will be reviewing them later this month. The components, the various components are in those guidelines addressing building form placement, setbacks, facade treatment, and elements, landscaping, lighting, etc. And actually, one of the comments we received was is the city developing these guidelines to apply to the project? It's actually the other way around. I'm sorry. The project is, the guidelines has spurred the developer to modify his design just like we intend the guidelines to do. So, wrapping up, so as we went through with the staff report, we looked at our comprehensive plan. As we went through with the analysis, we looked at our city's comprehensive plan and various plans that we have adopted and policies. These are some of the objectives in the comprehensive plan that we feel are compatible, that make this development consistent with our comprehensive plan. These are in our staff report. Also, our tax incremental district number 5 project plan. There's a little misunderstanding to this. Maybe Abby, you can elaborate on this since if you want to cover that, since you're our TIF person.
Yeah, so the intent behind the project plan as it was adopted for TIF District number 5 is that the plan provides a roadmap to implement a financial economic development tool. It's intended to make conservative development assumptions. I think what we've seen with TIF District 3 is that the project plan had incredibly conservative development assumptions. We want to make sure that the projections ensure financial feasibility to support the TIF district. The TIF plan is not a neighborhood plan, and it does not recommend development densities. The figures that are included in the TIF plan are just supposed to estimate what level of development might be possible on a site, looking at it using conservative assumptions.
So wrapping up, our staff recommendation, as indicated in our comments, is to recommend that the Plan Commission and Council approve the rezoning request from R2 to PDD GIP with the understanding that architectural, stormwater management, landscaping, lighting, and other design details will be addressed at the SIP stage, specific implementation plan stage. And our rationale, again, is that the project we feel is consistent with our objectives in the comprehensive plan, our TID 5 plan, the Historic Pheasant Branch Crossing Plan, Bike Ped Plan, and our Workforce Housing Strategy adopted in 2015. And just wanted to emphasize again that PDD zoning really does give us more control, does give the city more control of the site, whereas allowing it to redevelop under R1 or R2 standards, we have very little ability to regulate how the development occurs then. That's all I have. Any questions from Plan Commission members, or I think the developer probably has a few, can answer questions. I don't know if you had any.
So you want to, Jacob, you want to present anything, or?
I think maybe just Mark's here from JLA, and I think he maybe just wanted to talk a little bit about the change in the architecture.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm sure you guys have it in your packets, but
yeah, all this stuff is in your packet. I'm not sure how much of it makes it online for everybody to see. One of the things with the site density revision, I'm not sure if Mark mentioned it real quick, but we did change the density from 48 to 46, and what we did in that was actually combine some one-unit or one-bedroom units into 2 3-bedroom units, so actually adding family-style units to the project, which it didn't have before. So that's where the difference is, and where we're in here a couple months ago, 48 units down to 46. So architecturally, again, from when we were here in August, what was presented at that time was a flat roof 3-story building. As we continue to come out of that meeting and continue to work on the exterior architecture of that, and progress that design, again, the history is in the packet. We started talking to staff, and again, having the Pheasant Branch design guidelines. City staff asked us and recommended that in order to follow the guidelines that we go with a pitched roof building. So we started working on that design a few weeks ago. Subsequently, a couple weeks ago, we presented them with our option of a pitched roof building. We met with city staff, Mark and Abby, and Jeff from Vanderwall as one of their consultants, and kind of reviewed that design in correspondence again with the Pheasant Branch design guidelines, and talk through further revisions that can be made to the design to further follow those guidelines. So some of the highlights of the current design, again, outlined in the packet: pitched roof, architectural masonry, punched openings, window patterns, window grills, shed roof styles, colors, materials, etc. So we really worked on this design closely with Vanderwall, the city staff, and the Pheasant Branch design guidelines to really incorporate almost every single bullet point that was asked for in there, as long as building placement and interaction with the neighborhood. So that's how we've arrived at this, and we've got favorable reviews and response from city staff and Vanderwall on this version.
Okay. You guys, any commission members ask any questions? You want to come here, Lee? No, you're okay.
I was just curious if the setback has been changed from on the frontage. I didn't remember it being 30. Now it's 30.
Yeah, whoa, that's loud. So yeah, actually the setback has been, at least for the last number of months, I think through probably midsummer through now, has actually been the same. So we haven't changed that, but that does match up. I mean, it hasn't changed since when we were in here in August. It's the same setback, but it does again match up with the design guidelines recommended setbacks.
Dennis, I'm sorry.
One of the, I can't find it right offhand here, but one of the elements for the TIF was a green roof, and now with the different roof, what will happen with that, and is that still planned, or what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously weighing, those different elements.
Right.
This style of roof doesn't,
Right.
requested from the historic
That won't
standpoint.
be part of
That-
it.
yeah.
Will there be any other sustainable features that you could?
We'll look at doing on the other projects we have done, like solar photovoltaic systems. I mean, we do all Energy Star appliances, like high efficiency lighting, high efficiency, mechanical systems.
I have a question back here. Is there an elevator in the building?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Okay, I have some comments, and I think I'm going to start here now. So, I think Jacob has been working on this project almost for 2 years. He has done a great job. He has been very flexible. He has worked with his staff very well. He's very accommodative. And I like the latest design which he has over there. And so the first question is to answer is there a need for a development there? And the answer is yes. It is a blighted area. It needs some work there. And now there were, I have talked to many of you, either here at the City Hall or in your home over there, and I have great discussions. I have gone through just about every email which was sent either to me or to any other staff, and just about, and I have gone through all the people who have signed the petition and stuff. So I think I'm happy with the design, and I'm happy with a lot of things. But today, actually for several days or maybe 2-3 weeks, I was asking the staff that you got these two things, PDD and PDDI, and I wanted a table from them outlining that in this situation you apply PDD and this situation you apply PDDI. And finally, I should have really gone to the source to begin with, and so Lean was very nice. He printed this copy for me, and I spent a fair amount of time looking at it, and it's clear as a day and night for me. And so Mark went over it, a little bit of it. It says, I'm going to go through this. I think it's pretty important to achieve the community benefits of PDD zoning. It is generally true that the project size should be large enough to allow clustering and to establish coherence of design. Parcels less than 100,000 square feet are presumably too small to be approved, but small projects may still be submitted and considered. Okay, so now let's go to what does it say about the PDDI. So planned development district infill standards and regulations have been created for the purpose of allowing flexibility to accommodate infill and redevelopment on parcels less than 100 square feet. 100,000 square feet, and the parcels more than 100,000 square feet should comply with the normal PDD regulations. And now the PDDI district is referred to as infill zoning regulation because it is intended to be used in situations where new development or redevelopment is proposed within an already developed area or neighborhood, as is the case in this case. So you already have the homes which will be demolished, and this will be going in there. And if you were to look at Jacob's narrative, and you will see that he mentioned there it is an infill. So then I went through this table which Mark has created. And in any case, there was we all have gone through the table, but one of them was that there was a Middleton station. It was 22,000 square feet. It was infill because it was an infill there, and But I was told they had 39 apartments there that they didn't follow the guidelines, and that bothers me, that you get one approval of one kind and then it isn't followed through. In any case, in my mind, this is clear as a day and night, when you should apply PDD and when you should apply PDDI. And PDDI is more stricter, and there's probably reason for it, that it got some impervious surface ratio, it requires a floor area ratio, and it got some screening requirements, as you would expect in a neighborhood, that you don't want, it's in the developed neighborhood that they shouldn't be bothered with lights and stuff. So I think, in this case, PDDI fits right in there. I have absolutely no problem for approval for PDDI, but I have a huge problem, and I don't even know that why it was got to this stage that we kept following PDD when it really fits PDDI. And I would think that, I don't know, I don't want to go any further there, but so in my mind, that's what fits PDDI, not PDD. And I have gone through these papers as well as anything else which was there, and I just wish that I spent so much time going through all other documents that I should have had this to begin with. So in any case, those are my comments here. We can, as I said, the developer had done a great job. I even talked to him on the phone this morning. I wasn't decided at that time, but I am decided now after going through the city ordinances, what they require and what they say, and that's how I plan to vote for this. And but I have no problem other than that it's the infill which fits in there. Yes, Susan.
Okay, I have a question for Mark, and this is a difference between the PDI and the PDD with a GIP and SIP. I'm asking, because in Middleton Hills I know, which is PDD, the SIP is extremely strict, and I know I've already asked Jacob for several things I'd like included in the SIP, which is like for an oak tree to go in the portion that's closest to the conservancy, for additional landscaping funds to be provided for Katie Brown's backyard. Are those things that can be done with a PDDI?
Yes.
So that could also be included in a PDI?
Either one, either PDD gives us the flex. It's basically negotiation with how the project will evolve in terms of where, conditions of approval with landscaping and lighting and stormwater placement, where all that's placed, the site plan, etc. All that is a condition of approval, if you will, with the PDD.
For both, equally.
Except since you asked that question, Susan, if you were to look at this ordinance, PDDI is much more detailed and somewhat more stricter, and applies in this situation because you already have a development.
Yeah, but I guess my concern is with an SIP, it can be incredibly strict depending on what the Plan Commission and Council wants. And there are things specifically I've asked for that I want to be sure are included regardless of what kind of zoning it is. And I just want to be sure, I know it can be included in a PDD, I don't know for the PDI.
Now there's another thing which I want to make very clear, that some people have been saying that there's a deal between the developer and the city for swapping the land, and that's the last thing. At least I wouldn't do any such thing, and if anybody has, and I think they shouldn't, but I have absolutely no deal, and city has been applying for this grant since 2009, and well, Abby, you want to elaborate on that?
The city first applied for the grant using a consultant that was hired by the Public Lands Department in 2009 and then again in 2010. Both of those grant applications were unsuccessful. Subsequently, the Public Lands Department every year from 2009 through I think 2015 applied for capital budget funding to acquire these properties. That was also not successful. Our department applied for the grant in 2015. That was not successful. We applied again in 2016, and that's when we finally received the funding allocation. In order to, we got a grant of $172,250 through the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds. The Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds state that it has to be a willing seller, willing buyer relationship. So the city, that has been a question that's come up a couple times. Why doesn't the city condemn the properties and then acquire them that way? If the city were to go that route, which, past practice would say it's highly unlikely because the city typically doesn't go out and use eminent domain frequently for projects. But if the city were to go that route, we would not be able to also use the grant funding that has been secured. In addition, there's a recent change in state law that says the city no longer has the power of eminent domain for trail projects. We don't know if that would extend to a trailhead, but that's another point altogether because, like I said, the city really has no intention of condemning the properties. I guess the point that we were trying to make in the staff report is this isn't something that just sprung up as a deal with Jacob Klein. This is something that the city has long had in regional plans. We've long been applying for the grant. I do think that there is in some way a connection with the development, which is that I think that the development being proposed there might have pushed our application up, because we were able to say, well, there is now a development that is going to go on this site if the city cannot move forward to acquire the property. And so I think that might have scored our application higher. But I would say that aside from, the need for TIF 5 to have increment in order to do public projects, those are really the only two linkages. There's not a conflict of interest with the city looking to acquire property from the developer at the same time that the developer is proposing a rezoning. What we're proposing to acquire the trailhead for is for a public purpose.
Yeah, and if I was to, vote for this one in a certain way, it would have a no bearing as far as trailhead is concerned. I have had no discussion with the developer with respect to trailhead and this, and I don't know about the staff. So, anybody has any questions or comments?
Well, it seems like everything's decided. It makes me feel that you are going to push through with this new plan that the developer has presented, and that the city's getting these 2 lots, and that you're going to build a trailhead. Am I understanding differently?
Well, thank you, Shadow, but this is for the staff here. I guess this is not a public hearing. I appreciate your comments, so thank you.
I'm looking at
Yes.
this chart that, I guess, is this the one that you made?
Yeah,
You did?
I created that.
And there are numerous smaller lots that are PDDs, not PDD infill. And I'm wondering what happened in those cases and how did that evolve and why didn't they fit, as they would, sort of automatically into that infill?
Dennis, if you look at page 3 of the frequently asked questions document, there's I found in digging through our files, actually Eileen gets the credit for finding it, back in 1995, then City Attorney Bruce Kaufman wrote, the Plan Commission has the option, if it wishes to do so from a policy perspective, to utilize the PDD infill section to accommodate a PDD on a small lot. This is a policy, such as a 10,000 square foot lot. This is a policy decision as to whether or not they desire to use PDD infill for the smaller lots. And so, with all due respect to the mayor, our legal guidance back in the 90s, we've been consistent since then in terms of following that guidance from a policy perspective, letting the Plan Commission advising the council to determine whether something should be PDD or PDD infill. And it's unfortunate that in the case of Middleton Station, as the mayor noted, that was zoned PDD infill, but that doesn't even comply with the PDD infill standard.
I don't think Cardinal Road does either, to be honest with you.
So I didn't go through and look at what complies and what doesn't, because as far as I'm concerned, PDD is a document that is a process, a zoning process that allows you to determine exactly how you want that development to be, whether it has the infill tag or not. Frankly, from a staff standpoint, we just as soon get rid of the category. Our planning consultant feels the same way. The PDD infill category was intended for the University Avenue corridor, and we've never actually even used it there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, except we have it on the books now.
Yeah, but our attorney has advised us differently, Gertie.
Well, I mean, this is in black and white, and I don't know what attorney may have advised or not. I mean, as a city, you got to follow what's there in the books. Otherwise, why do you have in the books? Let's get rid of it. And also, if you had, if you sanction certain property PDD infill or PDD, I don't know why that wasn't used. Because PDD infill has much stringent requirements than PDD, and that's somewhat news to me that we gave them one classification and we didn't follow it through. So anyway, so any more questions? I think I have said my piece. I mean, I think that if the city has certain regulations, they are there to be followed. Yes,
How would this plan change if it was PDDI? What would you change? What would be changed about it?
Well, it has. There are basic standards here. It's the if you were to, I don't know if I can make you a copy. Yeah, I gave you one page. If you were to look at the back of it, it gives 3 big conditions. There's a basic standard. Maximum impervious surface ratio. Surface ratio is 0.5 residential and 0.7 non-residential.
So what is this one?
Well, I will let.
I believe it's 0.69, if I remember right. Is that the, Jacob, is that the number?
And what was the
I
number?
mean, we haven't even looked at, I mean, it seems like from, the chart that you put together that it's pretty clear that PDDs have been acceptable. I've done 2 developments in the city under 100,000 square feet as PDDs, and it seems like based on the track record that we're kind of getting into arbitrary type decisions here, and I don't really understand where this is even coming from. So that's not even something we've ever looked at.
And this is right here in the book. That is that was not infill which you did over there, both of those projects, and this is infill. That's the big difference.
Actually, the Oak Ridge project is under 100,000 square feet, and that was approved as PDD, and you voted for it, Mayor.
But that's not infill.
Oh,
I mean,
okay,
that's,
okay, wait. Okay. Cindy, you want to?
Well, I want someone to answer Kathy's question. So what, if this is PDD infill, what is the impact of this, of doing that on this project?
Okay, so there's it would have to meet the impervious surface ratio number 1, floor area ratio number 2.
What was that you just said?
The floor area ratio. How much is the floor versus to the total area, which
So what
I
is
don't
it
think
now?
it does.
What is this one?
This is the impervious area with respect to the total surface area.
Yeah, it was 0.69.
And here it's 0.70.
If you look at the developer's plan set, page 2, floor area ratio 1.02. And again, this is, and I didn't mean to, I'm not trying to pick an argument with the citizen who brought us the table. I'm just trying to point out that how you define a lot in a development site obviously affects these numbers. Impervious area, floor area ratio, etc. And the footprint of the building is substantially smaller than it used to be last spring. If we still kept that green space to the east, the 2 lots to the east, the floor area ratio and impervious surface area, for all I know, they'd be met. It'd probably be very close.
So, yes, sorry. It's then if you were to go further, it got require a dedication of land, 1,450 square feet, and it has a certain lighting requirements here, and then it has a screening requirements and pedestrian circulation requirements. It's much more stringent than the just PDD. So that's the big difference. So. Okay, anybody?
Would it be safe to say that we've, as a city, have misled the applicant?
I don't think so. I'm ready to make a motion here, and what I'm going to make, the motion is to rezone this property from R2 to PDD GIP. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Well, I certainly agree that that's the direction to go on it. We've been sitting on this for a long time. We've got asked a lot for a lot of changes, and the changes have been made, and they've been made in good faith. I think whatever it is, this meets the city plan for substantial infill. And, you can't put a one-story, two-story building there and expect that you're going to meet that standard. And I think that overall, we're looking to have the kind of facility, spreading these apartment buildings, as it were, throughout the city makes them accessible to people who work in various areas and doesn't put everything all, has a nice mix. And I think that's what Middleton has tried to do for a number of years now. And that's something we should just continue to do. So I'm in favor of this.
Okay, yes, David.
I think I agree with my colleague here. I have to say something about the evolution of the architecture, which has gone through a tremendous rethinking process to make it much more contextual within the street, to relate to the street in a much more harmonious kind of way, that creates something that is special about this rather than just, as you heard me keep saying, just another extruded piece of apartment building that could be anywhere in the city. This has been tailored to this site now through a lot of work by the developer, a lot of input from other people as well to get it to this point. And I think it would be an interesting addition to the community.
I don't see power lines in the drawing.
Sharon, please, that's for the commission members, if you don't mind. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. So, yes, Cindy.
I agree with the comments that Dennis made and with the motion that Leaf made, but I also am sympathetic to your concern about what we have on our books. And I think that what the staff showed us in their comments is that historically we have treated PDD zoning in a manner that's consistent with this project proposal. But I think that, and I read the statement about what Mr. Kaufman said years ago and so forth, but I think that what this project has taught us is that if we don't want that infill zoning or we don't want it used the way it is, we ought not have it on our books because it has put us in a very tough spot. And I absolutely have a lot of sympathy for the citizen who reads this and says it applies to this project, because when you read it, it does apply to this project. And so I think that I've been on this commission a long time, and I think the decision we're about to make here is consistent with what we've done in the past, but I would urge us to do something with our zoning code if it's not clear to us and to those that read it when they have an interest in a project.
That's a good point. I got to follow what's here, so.
I have a lot of sympathy for what you're saying.
Yep, well,
Yeah.
that's how it is, so. So, any other questions or comments? Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? So I'm opposed to it, clearly so. And
Just one nay.
Yes, and I have no problem with PDD infill. I just have problem with PDD, so. Okay. So the next item is the tax incremental request for tax incremental district number 5, Stagecoach Trail Apartments, J.T. Klein and Company.
So this is a request for developer finance TIF assistance to support the Stagecoach Trail development. The TIF request is for 1.6 million. A portion of that is for a living roof, and that is something that is seen as being a TIF eligible expense as far as sustainability features go. We've changed the way that we look at what the city is financing for sustainability features. So some of the things we no longer look at are energy efficiency, additional insulation in a building, those kinds of things we now believe are standard in the market. We also don't recommend TIF assistance for LED lighting, for example, and that's because the technology has come a long way, the costs have come down a lot, and we again believe that is now standard in the market. A green roof would be a TIF eligible expense. We now have learned that with the modifications to the architecture, that might end up being a solar project, which is something that we have done a lot of TIF projects that include solar, and the city typically incentivizes 70% of the cost of a solar project. So the proposal here is for 10% of the increment generated by this project to be returned to the general benefit of TIF 5, 90% being returned to the developer. Based on the calculations that our finance director has revised with the change from 48 to 46 units, we look like that's about right on target with where we think that this project will come in as far as increment goes. So our recommendation is for approval and a recommendation to Common Council for 1.6 million in developer finance TIF assistance.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, discussion. To me, it seems I have been consistent that we have been giving a lot more money on TIF than I would like to see. So this is 90% of the TIF going to the developer, and that's too high for me. So I'm not going to vote for 90%. I have been consistently telling the staff that that figure has to come down. In some cases, it has come down to 75%, and that will be acceptable to me, but 90%, that isn't so. Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to say that I think that the amount of workforce housing that's included, the underground parking, are very well suited to this project, and I mean, I'm in favor of the TIF for this.
But that affordable housing, that's a separate, or does it include the 1.6 million?
No.
It includes, the TIF in this project does include a provision to support workforce housing. Because this project has other additional financing, it is a little lower of a subsidy than we've had to provide for workforce housing on other projects. This allows 10 workforce housing units affordable at 50% of the area median income. In addition, there are other extraordinary costs related to this development: bioretention and stormwater management, soil remediation. We know there's poor soils. Demolition, building demolition, that's clearly a TIF eligible expense. Underground parking, and that's just the difference between typical costs and the elevated cost due to the poor soils, as well as workforce housing. And when we looked at this project compared to, many of the other TIF projects that the city has done, this is right in line with, what the city has established as a precedent from other projects.
That's in the past. I mean, okay. So, but in this case, so the total TIF will be more than well, I looked at the number, it will be more than 1.6 million then when you...
No, the development agreement would be
1.6.
Capped at 1.6, yeah. Okay. So if there were increment above and beyond what our conservative projections would indicate, then that would be additional increment to the general benefit of the TIF. And we will provide the spreadsheet prior to the Finance Committee and the council meeting.
Okay, so what I see, Abby, here in this table is 1.887800 TIF, total TIF request. On whatever page this is, so.
That was just the eligible cost. The request is, I think I might have wrote it wrong there, but the request is 1.6 and the eligible cost was the 1.8 and change, whatever it was. I didn't ask for the full amount of eligible costs.
And that, when we initially met with Jacob about this project. I know, he had identified costs above and beyond the 1.6 that are typical extraordinary development costs, but we very strongly felt that we wanted to have 10% of the increment come back to the general benefit of the TIF.
Why only 10%?
Well, because there were significant extraordinary costs related to the development, and after negotiating with the developer, we felt that 10% was a reasonable amount to support the general benefit of the TIF and also ensure that the project was viable for him.
I know it's better than zero, but I guess I have been saying repeatedly that and that we have to bring it down to about 75 or even less. So
and on some projects that will be
our
possible.
Goal, and it's better than in some cases we have given 100%. And this is this is step 5, which goes up to 2040 or
2036.
2036. So you're talking about 2036. So 10%, only 10% of the money coming to the city out of this. So.
And every project is different. The way that the city has always used TIF is to review projects on a case-by-case basis. We've never received policy direction from the council to set, a maximum percentage. I know that some cities who have done that have regretted it and have rolled back their requirements because every single TIF project is different. And every project has extraordinary costs. The city does not incentivize with TIF any costs that are normal in development, and we also don't provide any TIF assistance until we receive documented expenses and have them reviewed by our finance department to ensure that they meet the criteria.
Okay, David, do you have a question? No. Any other questions? So, okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Aye.
I just wanted to publicly say I got a little frustrated before and I allowed it to show, and I apologize.
Oh, no
So, to
no
you.
problem. It's good to show your.
It was.
Yes, I have no problem with those things. So. Okay, all right. Now it seems like an easy thing, right? So hard stuff is over. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your hard work. Request for rezoning from Highway Business B3 to Planned Development District, General Implementation Plan, Tristar Mixed Use Development, including Middleton Market.
Hi, Abby. How are you? Hello,
Oh,
everybody.
there's Robin.
I'm here. Fine. That's fine.
Oh, no problem.
I have.
Oh, right, that's not, no problem.
Thank you. Hello again. It's nice to be back. Mark and Abby, Mark and Abby recommended that we kind of go through a progression on where we are on the site and where we are with the request, what changes we've made. And just because it's been a while and it's been an iterative process with staff and with the Plan Commission. And so I wanted to start with this drawing is actually the plan that was concept approved here. Originally, we had, if you remember, a courtyard design with a courtyard. We changed that based on feedback from Vanderwall and Associates and from Plan Commission to actually design the site to have a road through the middle of it. And so I wanted to show this as a basis because this is what we started with from a concept plan, and we built from there to what we're bringing forward today. So if we look at this plan in whole, we did almost everything that was asked on the plan. So we extended the building, which you'll see in the new design. We have cut-throughs on both sides of the buildings. The only thing we didn't do is the drive lane through the building and the retail side. We left it as a pedestrian, and I'll talk a little bit about why we did that. So this is where we are today. The road. So let's talk about the road first.
a little bit closer, I think.
Sure.
Reflection there. Can you guys see? Well, we have a picture.
Only because we have a picture.
Yeah, we have a picture, so that.
Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay. So one of the things is Public Works has asked us to maintain a 66-foot right-of-way, and they also asked us to align up, and I might pass this around if you want to see a closer detail, align up our road with Jacob's two developments across the street, which we have done. So we've had changed the input just slightly to line up the road with the easement that Jacob has on his properties next door. We've also maintained a I got to look at my notes, 51-foot easement on this side of the top side of the lot. And we're asking to have the remaining 15-foot, if a road ever went through, to be taken off of the parcels on the other side. When we met with staff, Mark in particular had mentioned that there would be precedent for that. It would basically be the sidewalk and the apron that would affect or be used at the adjacent parcels.
I think it makes sense. I mean, it shouldn't come from one property, so.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Yes, David.
Could you remind me what the right-of-way of the road was in your first plan?
Do you remember?
In the north-south right-of-way?
Yeah.
I believe it was 48. At that time, we weren't looking at it ever being a public road, and now we've sized it appropriately so that if it ever needed to be, we would have that space.
And 66 mark is a standard, right?
Yeah, and so what we did is we actually squished the building a little bit, moved a stairwell and things on that side so we could get to that 51 on the north-south, what is that, east-west road.
But that still includes head-in parking, or?
So it does, yeah. So eventually, if there were roads put through the site, that would reduce our parking. It also would present a stormwater issue with, I brought my stormwater expert to talk about if we need to, because stormwater is quite a challenge on that site. So we have left the perpendicular parking. Actually, we've talked to City Works and they would prefer this way versus angled parking. And they don't have any great need to want the road to be public right now. And they wouldn't, my understanding, Mark and Abby, that they wouldn't approve it as a public road with the perpendicular parking, correct? Or they just didn't?
They do not like even angled parking on streets because it causes difficulty in plowing. And so we do have angled parking on Elmwood Avenue in Middleton, and working with Sean, we thought, well, maybe angled parking would be preferable to perpendicular parking. And Sean pointed out then that that would cause issues for people who are southbound, who are coming from Laura Lane. And so, you know, it seemed like our staff supported keeping the project the way that it's being proposed by the developer, but also reserving the right to acquire that right-of-way to meet the 66 feet and build it to public standards if at some point we decide we want that.
So the parking will be perpendicular then?
Yes.
Okay, I think that actually makes sense. Oh.
So if that happens, what do we do then about the lost parking?
We have actually, we will have stormwater issue if it does change to road, but we do have some spaces on the back side of the parcel and within the courtyard that we could displace green space for parking if we needed to.
Sorry, I'm 66 feet of roadway, right?
It's right of way. The roadway isn't that wide.
What's the roadway width?
Do we know that?
Is there like 11 feet?
Yeah, so what we did at the entrance, as you come in, we created radii, so it was like a public street feel to it. So the road width is larger in that section, around 30 feet. And the road width as you travel north then is 24 feet in width, 12-foot lanes on each side.
12-foot lanes and 20-foot or 18-foot for parking.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Just a criticism then of what's the radii on you to go into the into the street that you just mentioned?
I think we were trying to accomplish, in a previous rendition, we had commercial entrances with concrete flares, sidewalk, what you would see at a typical commercial development. The feedback we had was to try and make it the more welcome feel of a public street. So these would be typical radii that you might see at the intersection, say, of Lisa Lane and Laura Lane, and that was the design intent. We can switch back, but that was this intent.
So as tight as it can be. Otherwise, it's just encouraging traffic to go through quickly. Right? If you make it too easy, people will drive quicker.
And that's probably a good thing what they're doing then. That's what you would like, right?
As tight as we can get that curve, yes.
Well, and we're trying to balance speed within the walking areas as well as openness, which is something Kathy and Cindy have talked about a lot, is making sure that it feels open and feels like something you're supposed to go through, not a private driveway.
So David, do you have streets even tighter than 24 feet? How about in Middleton Hills? Is there anything less than 24?
Yes.
There are?
You know what?
No, because not tighter than 24. 2 lanes and a parking, so 24 and 8, 32 feet.
We have an 18-foot street in Middleton Hills, from curb to ribbon curb. Black Cherry Lane and then River Birch.
One-way street.
One-way street.
Yeah.
One-way street. River Birch is 20 feet.
No, I think 24 is, well, we will talk to staff,
No,
but
one
that makes sense.
Can I, as a resident
Yes.
of Middleton Hills too, one observation I would make is there are some places in Middleton Hills where the road sort of flares out, and it was probably put there, and no matter how many signs the city of Middleton puts up, people make U-turns and kinds of stuff. So I would discourage, I hope we learned a lesson from that, and I would discourage any further construction of that nature, because it's a mess.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, talk to Cindy so she can tell us.
All right, so from a building standpoint, we have been working with the design team, with Vanderwell and staff, and probably one of the biggest areas that we're still disagreeing on is 2 buildings versus 4 buildings. And so I wanted to talk through why we're at 2 buildings and what the difference is and what we've done to make the buildings accessible and easy and to create scale within the development. Right now, one of the big things is I have to have underground parking because we've talked about this before, I need a 1-to-1 ratio on parking. And so if we divide the buildings, I now have to put parking underneath ground, not underneath building, which adds precipitously to our costs, especially since I'm very limited in space with groundwater issues on that site. The other piece is stormwater. The bigger piece to me for my residents and myself, because I'll be living there, is we've been very specific in the amenities that we have for the buildings and trying to build amenities that if you're in one building, you get the gaming room and the pet spa and the bike workshop area. And if you're in the other building, you're directly connected to the market. So there's real benefits to each building that you're in. If I start dividing out buildings, one of the things we talked about is, do I disconnect the market building and just make that a standalone building? It has a disadvantage to the residents that are living there on that side. They would have to go outside. It also has a disadvantage where I can't share an elevator, so now I'm going to have to eliminate our mezzanine in that market building and eliminate our public classrooms that are up in that market building and some of the amenities that we were sharing the elevator with in order to access that second level in the market building. What we've done a number of things to try to reduce the scale and to make it livable within the space. One is there's an elevator bank at each of the corners. So most people will be parking underground. We have an elevator bank at the market that's shared with the market and the building. There's another one on the far corner of the building. There's an elevator bank at our lobby area in the retail building.
Could you explain what is the elevator bank?
So there's more than one elevator tower. In a lot of buildings, you just have one elevator tower, you'd have two elevators there, and you'd have to walk a long distance from where you're parking or where your unit is. So it creates banks of spaces so that when you're coming to the building, your mailboxes are there, you're coming up the elevator that's closest to your unit, you're not walking a long hallway to get the things that you're doing every day.
Thank you.
So there's 3 elevator banks, is what you're saying?
There's 4.
Where was, did you get
that's
to the
fine.
4th one? I didn't. Yeah, but I wanted to know if it's at the very.
There's one here, there's one here, there's one here, and there's one here. So, we have also spent a lot of time interior trying to make sure that the hallways feel welcoming, not long. I don't want a long hallway. People don't want long hallways, so we spent a lot of time with that design detail. We've also extruded the front portion of the lobby and building, and that was change based on feedback from the design committee to actually bring out and block kind of that expansive view that you would see just coming into the site. The market already did that on the right-hand side, and so we did that on the left-hand side and actually created a new clear glass, clear story function for actually our gaming room and lounge. So trying to create differential views and also breaking up different materials as you go along. So it's more like a row house would be, where it's separate it feels like separate buildings, but they're all connected. My architect can answer more questions about that if you want to. The scale is also very similar to what's across the street once you take the market and the retail off the building. So we're trying to be in scale with what else is being done in the neighborhood, and that's what we're doing. If you take that market off the front, the building on the right-hand side is very similar to what Jacob's done across the street. Similar, if you take the retail off the left-hand building, the scale then becomes closer to what's across the street. It's not identical, but it is quite close. For the number of units, I wanted to just touch on our newest market study that we just got back, so you guys were up to speed on kind of what the market's doing in Middleton. It's interesting that most of the retail managers that our market study and our appraisal for our loan talked to said that rental applications are becoming actually higher a rate than in years past, and there's a greater demand for apartment units than they anticipated. If you look at the supply that's in the pipeline today, so we're at 1% vacancy, and if you look at just pure population growth and the supply in both Fitchburg, Verona, Madison, and Middleton, we're going to bring about 2,000 units on if you include this one, and what's proposed but not approved across the whole Dane County region, or those 4 municipalities in particular. Your current inventory is a little over 7,400 units. That net demand will still give 200 to 500 unit deficiency in our market at 1% vacancy. 5% is a healthy vacancy rate. So it does feel like, gosh, we're getting a lot of apartments, but there's still a pent-up demand for apartments, and our population is still growing, and our employer bases are still growing. So we still have a ways to go to fill that gap, even with our units coming on and the newer ones downtown coming on. In addition...
So you feel pretty confident about it then?
I feel very confident about it, yeah.
Over what, was that over a 1 year?
That was actually net demand to 2020. So when we would come online, based on everything that's currently being proposed, not currently in construction, but currently being proposed. Also, 20% of our units, I went through and did our calculation, actually over 20% of our units are what we would call family housing units. So 2 plus bedrooms, so 2 bedrooms plus a loft, or 3 bedrooms are 20%. And we're also actually, this is new, we're going to offer a visually impaired package to actually, because one of our contractor and one of our partners actually is involved with the visually impaired and blind, and so we're going to add a visually impaired package for residents to be able to add to their units. In addition, we're doing a bunch of sustainability. You guys already know about the purple pipe and the PV, solar voltaic, but the building will also be Energy Star certified and Green Built certified. So things that are very important to me and things that we want to make sure that people are aware of. So sustainability is very important to us. And then finally, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the parking and landscaping. We have requested 1 stall per bedroom instead of 1.5 stalls per bedroom. That's historical for what we are seeing in 1 bedrooms are typically 1 person living in 1 bedroom, not sharing. Everything else we're following to your standards and the 2 bedrooms and the 3 bedrooms. We did reduce the market square footage calculation because we have a lot of back of house storage and shipping and refrigeration that isn't a usable space that people would be using from a retail space. We plan to follow all the city requirements for landscaping. We will go over and above for landscaping, including the 1 canopy tree for each 12 parking spaces plus 9 trees, and the screening barrier for the purpose of obstructing light beams and muffling noise where they're needed. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is using what we have to do for stormwater in a way that makes it walking path and usable space, not just bioswales in the middle of nowhere and not using the space around it. So I think that was it.
Any questions for Aban? You are happy, David, so you got some questions?
Comment.
All right, the comment, that will be okay too.
You have 2 very large landscaped areas in the court that create the courtyard.
Yep.
I hope you spend a lot of design consideration on those as spaces.
Yeah, so I have to say this as an aside. My mom spent 15 years running the landscape architecture department at the UW-Madison. She was the department administrator. So I have a very love of landscape architecture. So we're committing to doing all native plantings, no invasive species, and spending a lot of time on great landscape design.
Okay, I'm going to go through, David, you got some more comments? Okay. I'm going to go through some of the staff comments. So have you thought about the name, Market Apartments, Market West? So I think maybe a good idea to find a new name. So, we will let you think about it, but I thought that may be a good idea.
Yeah, initially we pointed out that Middleton Market was similar to Middleton Station and Market West Apartments, but upon further consideration, we like that name for a public market. We like the fact that the developer wants to have Middleton in the title. I think that, there are a lot of businesses in Middleton that include the word Madison, so we like the fact that, she's indicating that her food hall and public market is in Middleton. The apartments, on the other hand, that we were a little concerned about having those called Market Apartments because that is very close to Market West Apartments, and given that they're opening close, in a close time frame together, we thought that might cause some confusion for public safety.
So what do you guys think? You guys, this is your time to provide some input. Do you like a change, or you are happy with Market Apartments per se? Cindy, you got some.
I think Abby, I don't have a suggested another name, but I think Abby makes a valid point about confusion.
So the second big point I see here is in the parking. That is that I can see the city requires 549. You have comes up with 444 by various calculations, and you have 450. And so somebody had they're thinking that should we have a shared parking analysis, and I think we should. What do you guys think? I don't think we need 540 parking, and we did that for the Middleton downtown, and we did come up with, do you know, Mark, or anybody else, that how much the number was cut from? I know for
Middleton Center?
Yeah, it was cut from 570 to something
Abby,
down, yeah.
I don't have those numbers memorized anymore. We could call Eileen, but she's at the hospital right now. So
Okay, but let's enjoy that.
she won't
time,
answer if we
so.
try.
But to me, it seems that shared parking analysis does make sense, doesn't it? So that she doesn't have to have a 549.
Yeah, I mean, we could work with the company that prepared the shared parking analysis for Middleton Center. You know, because this is commercial and residential, there, I think, could be some real opportunities for shared parking here.
And I like bicycle, 50 bicycles, that's a good thing. And I also like the keeping that road private for now, and then, you know, if city needs it later, so that it's available. And I also like you're be very generous, having 51 feet on your east-west side. So otherwise, one would have thought if you give 33, that's your share. So that's very good. So yeah, so I think I like the changes which you have made.
Well,
yes, David.
I think that we should do the
Yes, Dennis.
TIA, just because we did it downtown, we've got to treat everybody alike, and they had a lot of hoops.
Oh, yeah.
The survey makes sense.
Yeah, she would have to go
Shared
through that.
Parking survey.
Yeah.
And all of your parking lots are going to be permeable concrete, aren't they?
No, they're not. I'm not a huge fan of permeable concrete. Actually, I just had this conversation at a committee I do. Just the maintenance and the upkeep in our climate zone is very difficult on the permeable concrete, so.
Permeable asphalt concrete.
Right, or permeable asphalt, so we've tried to reduce the amount of permeate that we have on site, but right now we have traditional asphalt. We do other things, though.
Wait and see.
Okay, more questions for Robin here.
I have.
Yes.
I'm interested in, we haven't talked about, in the comments you made, we haven't talked about the building size, and staff has some concern about that, so I'd like for us to talk about that a little bit.
All right.
This thing you put superimposed on downtown was a little hard to figure out, but it makes a good point in how big those buildings are. So could we talk about that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I think, you know, these are large buildings, and the concern is that it might make it difficult for site circulation. I think Robin also accurately pointed out that they aren't that dissimilar from what is on the south side of Lisa Lane. If you were to take the commercial portions of the buildings off, they're very similar in size to what Jacob has on the south side. I think those are large buildings, and when you look at them, you know, if you think about walking around these buildings, for example, and you know, Robin also pointed out that there's no reason for someone to walk from one part of the building to another, and there are separate elevator shafts and parking areas and all of that. But I mean, if you think about the distance that we're talking about here, and you look at this superimposed on the downtown, those are very, very large buildings. We thought, you know, from a building massing standpoint, that it would be nice if they could be broken up into, you know, 4 buildings rather than 2 very large buildings.
Any other? Yes.
Well, we give us an
Dennis.
opportunity in our PDD zoning to have clusters.
Yeah. Good thinking, yes.
Yeah, you know, gotta
I know Robin has
use the law.
Her own reasons for keeping the way they are.
And
so.
Robin, you explained to us about the elevator banks and why you want to keep it in 2 buildings. So how do we resolve?
Well, we do have circulation cut-throughs through the building already. So we have building cut-throughs for residents that you probably can't see on the plans here that actually do. So from this back corner of the lots, there'll actually be a cut through because that's where the pet spa is currently located as well. So you'll be able to come from where we think the dog exercise area will be and be able to go into the pet spa, cut through the building and go across to the other buildings as you need. There's also circulation cut throughs at both entrances. We're creating within the market an entry in the back side of the market, so there'll be a central entry in that back side of the market as well as the front side of the market. So we really are trying to make it easy for residents to get in and out, and there will be an exit also on this part of the building, correct? Yeah.
Public walkways that go through as well. I couldn't quite see where you were pointing, but there's a public walkway that goes through the building at this location and this location. So even if you're not a resident and you parked back here and you want to come out to here, there's ways to get through there.
So you will make sure that there's a circulation because you don't want, otherwise people are going to have issues.
Heck, I don't want to be stuck over here on the pet spa side and need to get to the other building and not have an easy way to get there. That's important to us as well. But the economies of scale and even separating them into, say you divide this into two buildings, you won't get a lot of separation between the buildings. Visually, when you're looking down the street, you really won't see much separation, even if we did separate these two. Like I said, we could separate the market, but it does affect what the amenities end up being in the market itself.
Yeah, even if you look at the downtown, if you're looking from Parliament, you don't think there are two buildings.
Right, right, that's true.
One, right?
That's true.
But when you go further down, you can see that there are actually two. Yeah, so that does make sense. So, other questions for Auburn here, Kathy? So you have anything? How about Dennis?
No, except that I'd like to know where the viewpoint is for this picture, because I don't think a person could stand anywhere and see it this way.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea.
Perspective. This is.
You're standing in Jacob's driveway, basically.
Well, we're up quite a bit higher than Jacob's. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think of these theater business, and I look at these as the selling point.
Oh, bye, Kurt.
Nobody can ever see any of this. So it looks somebody made a few days' wages doing this, but on the other hand, it's pretty useless.
Right. Well,
we're trying to at least capture what the feel would be on the site for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it won't feel like that. It will never feel anything as open as that, and that's somewhat deceiving. It's yeah, I mean it is deceiving, but
it was not my intention to try to do. Yeah, yeah. It is a sales tool. I will admit. Yes.
Remember that Dennis is a retired professor of theater and lighting. So I think that's his expertise. David, you seem like. How about you? Okay, well, so Abby, you have any further?
No, this has been really nice to have some input from the Plan Commission. I appreciate the comments. I would say that the main things that are outstanding at this point are the TIA, which Public Works has a scope of work. They're working on it. I don't think the committee has approved it yet.
It got approved last night.
Did it get approved last night?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that off the list here. Thank you. So the TIA process has started.
Yeah.
If the commission wants a shared parking analysis, that's something that has yet to be started or worked on. And the stormwater management plan, which I believe is in the process of being reviewed by the county right now.
So the big thing is, what do you guys think of the shared parking thing?
I do think it's a good idea to do it because I think it will give us some information, and it also done it with the downtown large project, and it was valuable to us. We learned some things from doing it.
And also we don't end up with, she doesn't end up with too many parking spaces which she doesn't need, so.
Right. So I do think that's a good idea that I think Dennis suggested.
How about the other folks here? Because we are going to have to provide her input. There's no voting here, right?
Right.
This is for input for you, Robin, so.
When do we get to vote?
Yes.
Well,
voting
it's
on
at
it.
the discretion of the plan commission.
Yeah, this is.
I mean, we've already held the public hearing for the GIP, so if the plan commission is comfortable recommending approval of the GIP tonight with contingencies, that is an option. Our staff recommendation was for deferral because of the outstanding issues with stormwater plan, the TIA, and I'm glad to hear that Public Works moved the scope of work forward.
But we still have to look at it.
Right.
Well, the TA, oh, sorry.
Yeah, but the Plan Commission has approved projects at a GIP stage contingent on approving the TIA and satisfying any of the recommendations that come out of the TIA. So that has been done. Whether you think we're ready for that or not, that's really at your own discretion.
Okay.
We could put it on the next Plan Commission agenda as well and provide an update with how the outstanding referrals are.
Okay, what do you guys think?
I'll move deferral to the next plan commission meeting.
Okay. All right, so that shows me what you think. Okay, we need a second then.
I'll second it.
Okay, so any more questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
I'll see you in 2
opposed?
weeks.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? So motion passes unanimously. Well, Robin, have a great evening, so.
Kurt, were you an aye on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Comprehensive plan update, proposal to complete land use element.
So this, as you all know, we've been working on updating the comprehensive plan. We have 5 of the 9 chapters available for review on the planning department website. We have been working with Vanderwall and Associates to update the maps, and we've done quite a bit of work on the land use map and other maps that will be included in the comp plan. We, as you know, have a lot of projects going on right now, and so we're requesting authorization to work with Vanderwall to help us draft the land use element. So that again is just one of the 9 chapters. Based on the initial proposal that we got from Vanderwall, we extrapolated and we figured that in its entirety, the comprehensive plan would cost about $200,000 if the city hired a consultant to do it. We're trying to get it all done at a staff level, but again, with the various committees and other priorities, we are really hoping to get it completed by the end of the year, and we could use a little bit of extra assistance. So what we're proposing here is that we would utilize funding that's already budgeted, but in a separate line item. Mike Davis, our city administrator, offered to advocate to the city council that we could use his leftover intern funding to pay for a portion of it. And we also have our staffing assistant, Anna, who's been working for the city for a couple of years, recently took another job in Madison. So we have a couple of accounts that we have some funding left over. That would require authorization by the finance committee and the council, but it's money that's already been budgeted, but in other line items.
So this is some of the things which I've been thinking about. This city hasn't had any visioning sessions since 2006. So I'm planning, or at least hoping, that we will have some sort of sessions. I don't know when it will be. Where do we want to go as a city?
Well, we actually had 9 public input sessions. I believe it was 9.
Yeah, I know, but
as
that
part of
was
the comp
just
plan.
they were very limited, right?
No, that was the most extensive public input process that the city has ever done for any plan. It was the first time that we ever hired or got an interpreter so that we could offer a session in Spanish. We had a session at the Middleton High School where we involved students. We had a session at Arbor Lakes Apartments. We had one with the Middleton Chamber of Commerce, their economic development group. What am I forgetting, Mark? One at the Senior Center. We offered public input at many different times of the day to accommodate different schedules.
Even during a snowstorm.
We even had one during a snowstorm where we only had one person show up, and it was a plan commission member. But we got some really, really good public input. So I feel like that is the part of the planning process that we are done with. I mean, aside from having to hold a public hearing when we actually have drafted all of the sections and we want to get feedback on them, but we held 9, like I said, 9 public input sessions, and that was quite an extensive and time-consuming process.
So where would I find that information?
Well, it's available on our comprehensive plan update
I'd like to
webpage.
see how many people actually did come and where and all those details, and what was the input.
Well, Mark has compiled an Excel spreadsheet and actually listed it by the various elements of the comp plan. So we categorized all of the input that we received based on the element, the chapter.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look at it.
So
because
back to the comprehensive plan update. I'll recommend approval to the Common Council of the Vanderbilt proposal at a cost not to exceed $12,500.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion? I do have some questions, but maybe I can talk to the staff. It's just, I just wondered, what are the new land use categories here?
Oh.
Does anybody know? Maybe David does, or?
No,
I mean, that's the reason why we are doing it, at least it looks like it. You know, I saw that word.
I can explain. My voice is going to cooperate. Mike Slavny with Vanderbilt Associates has been using, developed these categories, I'm going to say 10, 20 years ago, quite some time. Rather than focusing so much on on residential versus commercial, it talks more about the form of for example, suburban versus urban. I don't have all the categories in front of me. I haven't looked at it, but it's a different way of categorizing, so you don't distinguish so much between office and commercial. It gives you more flexibility and speaks more to the form of the lot, recognizing there's more mixed use land uses happening now. So that's what the reference is to the new character-based land use categories.
And I saw there's a quick translation key, and I would rather have these things simple rather than complex, where you don't need a key.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
It's
that
right
is.
here. And
Well, I see it here. I just don't
Yeah.
know what they mean by that.
Okay, anyway, so maybe.
So in other words, translating between the existing land use, the traditional land use categories and the zoning districts, so it's some sort of way to interpret.
Keeping it simple. though.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any other, should they consult, at least get some input from some of these, plan commission members? David, you want to provide them any input, or Kurt, or you want to provide some input? I mean, we are spending money here, so we want to make sure we get the maximum value out of it.
Yeah, I taught comprehensive planning, and Vanderwall's comprehensive plans are really good for the land use element, so I think it's money well spent.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? I call the question. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? So the motion passes to pay $12,000 to Vanderwall for this plan.
It's a recommendation to the council.
It's a recommendation to the council. All right. Thank you, Mark. So, okay, the last item, to set a public hearing, proposed general implementation plan amendment, the community of Bishop Bay, the Black Line neighborhood, increased density. So what is the proposed date?
November 14th at 7:05 p.m.
Okay. So
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Okay, need a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion now? If there's no more discussion, I call the question. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, guys. Great job. Wow.